Ave, true to Christ. Hey everybody, this is Catholic Trash Talk, and today we're going to be talking about the First Lateran Council. I'm actually awake today, so this should go pretty well. So let me get the video started. Just like usual, we will watch the summary video, and then we'll get into the document. Fortunately, it's really small, so hopefully we can keep this video short. We will see how it goes. So first we have the summary of the Lateran Council.
And honey badgers, welcome to Clarifying Catholicism. You're watching part 11 of a series on the history of the ecumenical councils according to the Catholic Church. Today we are covering the First Lateran Council. Much of this information was gathered from Joseph Kelly's The Ecumenical Councils of the Catholic Church, a history. So if you want an in-depth dive into these topics, please make sure to pick up a copy of his book. To see the rest of our episodes, check out our playlist in the description.
Oh shoot, I just realized I forgot to subscribe to this guy.
You'll notice that whereas many of the preceding councils dealt with struggles between East and West, the councils of the early second millennia primarily focused on clerical reform and running the Roman Church. By the late 9th century, the empire created by Charlemagne was not in great shape. It suffered from weak leadership and military assaults from every direction. The papacy, trying to stay afloat in such turbulent times, aligned itself with powerful families who could ensure a stable income of money and resources, leading to what many
That's why he's wearing the tie. That's funny.
The papacy. Rival families often arranged for the deposition, mutilation, and murder of popes. Between 882 to 904, a span of 22 years, there were a dozen different popes. Basically a pope every other year, most of whom were corrupt, greedy, miserable men whose lives met rather gruesome ends. But that's a topic for another video. In 955, Pope John XII assumed the papacy, when an Italian prince began attacking the papal states. A German named Otto the Great sought to become king of Germany and offered to protect the pope in exchange for his blessing. Sound familiar? Pope John approved, and in 962, Otto was crowned the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. This new partnership was a resounding success, but John eventually started worrying that his new ally would meddle in his own affairs. John led a plot against Otto, it failed, and Otto had him replaced with Pope Leo VIII. This exchange emblemizes the awkward power dynamic that would characterize papal-imperial relations for the following centuries. While technically speaking, the Pope had the power to appoint emperors, they also relied on those same emperors and their families to sustain their existence. The outcome of this was that often the king would select the Pope in advance and force their election. In return, the Pope would bless the emperor's handpicked successor, and integralists wonder why I don't take them seriously. In the year 1002, Henry II assumed the office of emperor. Taking notice of the last couple centuries of papal debauchery, he sought to clean house a little. He recommended clerical reforms that would improve the morality of high church officials. Henry III had a similar attitude, and when in 1045 there were 3 claimants to the papacy, he called a council and declared all 3 as unworthy, installing a pro-reform German bishop, Clement II, instead. Clement's reign was followed by 3 other pro-reform popes. Leo IX deposed several bishops for simony, or basically bribery, and Nicholas II decreed that bishops, rather than political elites, would elect popes. This time period was also marked by a formal schism between East and Western Christianity. The Patriarch of Constantinople, Michael Ceruleus, resented the Western Roman Church, claiming that many Eastern churches were being too Latinized. After a series of diplomatic failures between him and Rome, he excommunicated Rome in 1054. Today we recognize this as the Great Schism that divides Eastern and Western Christianity. But back then it wasn't really seen as a big deal. People generally saw it as just another excommunication levied by East against West, which was a common practice that you've seen throughout this series. Anyways, in 1073, Pope Gregory VII came to power and blamed much of the corruption of the papacy on lay rulers. He wisely recognized that by depending on kings, emperors, and noblemen for protection and authority, the papacy became too easily swayed by temporal affairs and was continuously tempted into falling into the same vices that lay rulers did. So, he took an important step. Before Gregory, bishops were given authority by the king, a practice called investiture. The Pope sought to end this practice, but the Emperor Henry IV would not have it. Henry and his German bishops refused to abide by this decision, and Gregory responded by deposing him as emperor. Henry apologized and agreed to abide by the Pope's wishes if he was reinstated. Once he was reinstated, he reneged on his word and was deposed again. Henry responded by invading Italy. Gregory had to flee to Henry, I guess. Died there. Pope Paschal II's solution was that the king could give a bishop his temporal power, but not his spiritual power. England and France accepted this, but Germany was not exactly happy to oblige. Paschal chose the coronation ceremony of the new Emperor, Henry V, as the perfect time to break this news to Germany, which responded by arresting the Pope and forcing him to back down from his position. 2 popes later, Callistus II decided to finally enact the investiture reforms at an ecumenical council. Shortly before the council met, Henry V finally relented and agreed that the right to invest bishops with their spiritual authority came from the Pope alone. Callistus wanted to solidify this development, though, so he hosted a council in Rome at the Lateran Cathedral, the Pope's Cathedral, in 1123. It was the first ecumenical council to be called by the Bishop of Rome. This council not only addressed the investiture controversy, but it ensured nobles would not fight on certain feast days, gave the Crusaders, who we'll talk about next episode, an indulgence, and protected the families and goods of Crusaders and pilgrims. Still, the council's most notable achievement was depriving the monarchy of its ability to invest bishops with spiritual authority, a major first step towards curbing corruption in the church. The Lateran Council is an excellent example of how church councils not only address theological matters, but logistical ones as well. This tendency would characterize many of the medieval councils, as you will see in future episodes. Thank you very much. God bless you.
God bless you too, brother. So, it moves us on to the document, which, as usual, let me get that set up. There we go. All right. So the first Lateran Council took place in 1123 AD. There's just going to be the introduction and the canons, so I'm just going to read everything. It's only like 2 pages long. Introduction. In 1123, during the pontificate of Pope Callistus, and I can already tell, I'm going to need my glasses for this. Nerd mode activated. A general Roman council was held, quote, for various important matters of the church, end quote, as Callistus himself says in the letter of convocation, which he sent on June 25th, 1122, to Bishop Baldric of Dol. A great number of bishops, abbots, and religious, numbering at least 300, gathered in Rome from the Western churches, though none that we know came from the Eastern churches. There is no evidence that the legates of the Emperor Henry V took part. The council began on March 18th, 1123, with the Pope presiding. There were at least 2 sessions. The council ended before April 6th, probably on March 27th. This council is often called, quote, general, end quote, in the letters and decrees of Pope Callistus II. It is reasonable, however, to doubt its ecumenicity. Indeed, the manner in which the council was called and conducted by the Pope and the Fathers differed from that of the older councils. Moreover, several other councils, similar to Lateran I, were convened in the 11th and 12th centuries, but not termed ecumenical. The ecumenicity, of this council seems, as far as we can tell, to have been confirmed by the later tradition of the Roman Church. There had been long conflict between church and state, though some sort of solution had been reached a short time before at the Concordat of Worms in September 1122. Thus, questions concerning the investiture of prelates and the freedom of the church were a major concern of the council. The said concordat was approved and confirmed by the council's authority, though not without opposition on part of many, as Gerau, Reichersberg testifies. Canons 3 through 4, 8, and 12 make mention of this debate. Thereby a measure of peace and discipline was restored to the church. The Fathers devoted themselves principally to the reform of the church, to the abolition of synonymity, and to the correction of the ecclesiastical abuses. There were a few other matters of lesser importance, also the struggle for the Corsican episcopacy between churches of Genoa and Pisa was a considerable problem, and a commission of 24 fathers had to be created by the Pope in order to resolve the matter. See Canons 1, 7, and also Canons 2, 5 through 6, 9, 11, and 16. Just basically all the canons. Thus Pope Callistus following as closely as he could to the examples of Gregory the Seventh and Urbain the Second, and supported by the approval of the council, brought to the successful conclusion matters which had engrossed the whole church's efforts and zeal for almost 50 years. A number of canons were ratified by the council fathers, perhaps at the session on March 27th. Many of these were included in the Gratian's decree c. 1140, namely canons 1, 3 to 4, 6, 9, 12, 14, and 16, 16b, 19 to 22b, and part of 8, 18b. As far as we know, Baronius was the first to print others, which Gratian did not accept. 12 more follow in the Roman edition, where the complete text of canons may be found. We examine all the canons in the following, and they list all the canons. And if you guys want to read this document, I do have it in the description if you want to see all the references, but I'm going to try and keep this short. The text of the canons presents some difficulties. BN2, ER, LC, HRD, CL, and MSI must have been printed the same text that was used by RM. Though with some differences, this commonly accepted version, which we call B, consists of 22 canons and seems to derive from 2 manuscripts, codices, not from RM, which RM. Oh, I got you. Didn't really define what RM is, but that's okay. We will just deal with it. They're just talking about a bunch of... I'm going to skip most of this, actually, because they're just talking about why the canons were ordered in the way they were. So the actual canons themselves. So, 1, following the example of the Holy Fathers and renewing them as we are bound by our office by the authority of the Apostolic See, we altogether forbid anyone to be ordained or promoted in the Church of God for money. If anyone indeed should have been ordained or promoted in the Church in such a fashion, let him be utterly deprived of the office acquired. 15. And this is backed up by the Council of Toulouse in 1119. Okay. So all these... Okay. All the footnotes I'm going to avoid as well, because they're just basically saying where these justifications come from. 2, we absolutely forbid those excommunicated by their own bishops to be received in communion by other bishops, abbot, and clergy. They've talked about that in the previous councils. 3, no one may consecrate as a bishop someone who is not canonically elected. If anyone should presume this, let both consecrator and consecrated be deposed beyond hope of restoration. This is... leading on some of the canons that are expanding on the canons that they had established before in previous councils. 4, absolutely no archdeacon, archpriest, provost, or dean may grant to anyone the care of souls or prebends in a church without the decision or consent of the bishop. Rather, it is constituted by the holy canons that the care of souls and the dispensing of ecclesiastical affairs remain in the decision and power of the bishop. Indeed, if anyone presumes to do something against this, or to claim for himself the power which pertains to the bishop, let him be banished from the bounds of the church. And what the direction of this is trying to restate and to remind us of the power of the bishops, that they are led by God, and that they aren't to be deposed or to be thrown away by inordinate means, by lay means, by things that don't have authority, or by things that are not allowed to impede the office of the bishop. And this also expands the power of Rome in this. 5, the ordinations made by the heresiarch Burdinus after he was condemned by the Roman Church, and whatever was afterwards done by pseudo-bishops ordained by him, we judge to be null and void. No one except a priest may be ordained to the office of provost, archpriest, or dean. No one except a deacon may be ordained to the office of archdeacon. 7, we absolutely forbid priests, deacons, and subdeacons to live with concubines and wives wild, and to cohabitate with other women, except those whom the Council of Nicaea permitted to dwell with them solely on account of necessity, namely a mother, sister, perennial, or paternal or maternal aunt, or other such persons, and about whom no suspicion could justly arise. 8. We further resolve, in accordance with the statute of the most blessed Pope Stephen, that lay persons, however religious they may be, have no power to depose any ecclesiastical business, but following the apostolic canons, let the bishop have the care of all the ecclesiastical matters, and let him manage them as in the sight of God. Therefore, if any prince or layperson should arrogate to himself the disposition or donation of ecclesiastical things or possessions, let him be regarded as sacrilegious, based. 9. We prohibit unions between blood relatives, because both divine and secular laws prohibit them. For the divine laws not only cast out those doing this, and their progeny, but also call them accursed. The secular laws call such people disreputable and deprive them of their inheritance. We therefore, following our fathers, mark them with infamy and judge them to be infamous. Crusades. 10. To those who set out for Jerusalem and offer effective help toward the defense of the Christian people and overcome the tyranny of infidels, we grant remission of their sins, and we place their houses and families, all their goods, and under the protection of blessed Peter and the Roman Church, just as has been decreed by our Lord Pope Urban. Whoever dares to disdain or carry off their houses, families, and goods while they are on their way shall be punished with excommunication. Those who have put crosses on their clothes with a view to journeying to Jerusalem or to Spain, and have later taken them off, we command by our apostolic authority to wear crosses again, and to complete the journey between Easter and the following Easter. Otherwise, from the moment we cut them off from entry into the church, and forbid divine services in all their lands, apart from the baptism of infants and confessions for the dying. Brutal. 11. With the advice of our brothers and the whole curia, and with the wish and consent of the prefect, we order the abolition of the immoral practice hitherto obtaining with respect to the dead Porticani, so that the goods of Porticani dwellers dying without heirs are to not be dispersed against the wishes of those dying. This, however, maiden, this is to the extent that the Porticani remain obedient and faithful to the Roman Church and to us, our successors. 12. In accordance with the canons of the Holy Fathers, we absolutely forbid and prohibit the laity, under the penalty of anathema, to remove the offerings from the most sacred and revered altars of the Blessed Peter and the Savior, of Saint Mary Rotunda, and of Saint Nicholas of Bari, of Saint Giles, or from the altars and crosses of all the other churches. Apostolic authority, we forbid the fortification or taking hold in churches by laypersons. 13. Whoever knowingly makes or intentionally spends counterfeit money shall be separated from the communion of the faithful as one accursed, an oppressor of the poor, and a disturber of the state. Brutal. 14. If anyone tries to attack pilgrims to Rome and foreigners visiting the shrines and apostles and the oratories of other saints, or to rob them of the things they bring, or to trouble merchants with the new extractions of tolls and fees, let him be deprived of Christian communion until he makes reparation. 15. We confirm with the authority of the Holy Spirit whatever has been determined by the Roman Pontiff, our predecessors, concerning the peace and true God, or arson, or the public highways. MSI as Canon 14 and B as Canon 13 have different text, namely, if anyone should violate a truce, he is to be admonished up to 3 times by the bishop to make reparation. If he acts in contempt of the third admission to make reparation, the bishop, either with the council of the metropolitan or with 2 or 1 of the neighboring bishops, shall declare the sentence of anathema on the rebel and denounce him in writing to all the bishops all around. 16. Following the footsteps of the Holy Fathers, we order by general decree that the monks be subject to their own bishops with all humility, and show due obedience and devoted submission to them in all things, as if to masters and shepherds of the Church of God. They may not celebrate masses in public anywhere. Moreover, let them completely abstain from public visitations of the sick, from anointings, and even from hearing confessions, for these things in no way pertain to their calling. Indeed, in the churches where the ministry is recognized, they may only have priests who were ordained by their own bishop, to whom they will answer for the care of souls which they have assumed. In Perts, there is only, quote, we absolutely forbid anointings and visits to the sick and public masses by monks. And then, quote, the examples of Leo to Dioscorus, that on the day of resurrection there may be a Levitical and sacerdotal ordination, chapter 19. That on Sunday morning, continuing the fast of Saturday, there can be ordination, chapter 20. MSI as Canon 18 and B as Canon 17 have different texts, namely, we should forbid abbots and monks to give public penances, to visit the sick, to perform anointings, and to chant public masses. They shall receive chrism, holy oil, consecrations of altars, and ordinations of clerics from the bishops in whose diocese they reside. 17. In our desire to preserve peace by the grace of God, the possessions of the Holy Roman Church, we strictly forbid, under plain anathema, any military person who should seize hold by force the Benevento, the city of Blessed Peter. If anyone should dare otherwise, she shall be bound by the chain of anathema. The remaining canons are missing in Alpha, and MSI has canons 18 to 19 together with canon 16. The first part of this canon, priests, pertains to the bishop, may belong to canon 16b. 18. Priests to be appointed to parish churches by the bishops, to whom they shall answer for the care of souls, and for those matters which pertain to the bishop. They may not receive tithes or churches from lay persons without consent of the wish of the bishops. And if they presume to do otherwise, they shall be subject to canonical penalty. 19, we allow the service which monasteries and their churches have paid from this time. Pope Gregory VII, until now, we altogether forbid abbots and monks to have possession of churches and bishops by 30 years provision. 20, having in mind the examples and traditions of the fathers and discharging the duty of our pastoral office, we decree that churches and what belongs to them, both persons and possessions, namely clerics, monks, and their lay brothers, as well as those who come to pray and what they bring with them, are to be under protection and not harmed. If anyone dares to act contrary to this after recognizing his villainy and has not properly made amends within the space of 30 days, let him be banished from the bounds of the church and be smitten with the sword of anathema. 21, we absolutely forbid priests, deacons, subdeacons, and monks to have concubines or to contract marriages. Still wild to hear that. We adjudge, as the sacred canons have laid down, that the marriage contracts between such persons should be made void and the persons ought to undergo penance. 22, we condemn the alienations which have been made everywhere, especially by Otto, Jeremias, and perhaps Philip, of the property of exarchate, whatever, of Ravenna. Moreover, we declare in general to be invalid the alienations made in whatever fashion all persons, whether they are intruded or were canonically elected in the name of the bishop or an abbot, who should be consecrated in accordance with the usage of his own church, and the ordinations conferred by them without the consent of the clergy of the church or through simony. But we also forbid that any cleric should presume to alienate in any way his prebend or any ecclesiastical benefice. Any such actions in the past or future shall be invalid and subject to canonical penalty. I think it's interesting that a lot of these, and I'm going to look up simony. Simony definition. Buying or selling something spiritual or closely connected with the spiritual. Interesting. So, anyways, and so in that context with the simony, oh, I got you. So it's, the corruption, the indulgences, the fattening of basically what was being talked about in the video of the emperor trying to sweeten their deal and cut a deal with the Pope, and then the Pope, by extension, continues the nepotism because there was a lot of corruption that was happening. But, it's interesting. This is why you would think that if God didn't exist, we wouldn't come to this understanding of, well, we got this sweet deal and the church fights back against it. And it's, the Pope does have to at least sign off at some point on this, and there has to be a consensus, right? So it's really interesting that even with all this corruption going on, we were still guided as a church away from that corruption. And you can see in the last three ecumenical councils that there was this building of a moral law within the church and how to properly conduct business and how to make an administration, but also to build up the church even stronger. For the summary of what we talked about. We talked about the Lateran, the first Lateran Council, which took place in AD 1123. But the Lateran I Council is actually not cited in the Catechism, which is pretty interesting. And the major decision they did was ending the lay investure of bishops, which was a disciplinary decision, not only to get rid of corruption in the church, but also was a response to the fact that there's a little bit of an oversight. There's also a little bit of a hot pot of near occasions of sin and of simony and of selling positions and offices for profit and making the church into trade goods. And what we saw in the last council is that they were trying to avoid the church being a church of money changers, and that we don't make the same mistake that the Pharisees made in letting the traders into the temple to be able to make it a marketplace. And isn't it interesting that even with all this corruption, even with all this going on, the church was still moved forward. And we saw this with Nestorianism, we saw this with Arianism. There were multiple times where the church could have been taken over, but it didn't. It was guided in a better direction. And so, just reflect on how amazing that is. But that is everything, guys. Feel free to bully me in the comments and tell me why I'm wrong. I look forward to hearing from you guys, and I hope you have a wonderful day.